Awesome. So who wants to go first? Hello.
Uh, I suppose I'll go first.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Uh, yeah, I so I went into this not knowing much about the person, the subject in hand. I wasn't like, I mean, I had seen I've seen some headlines about Duterte in the news before, but apart from that, I didn't really have a clear picture of the Philippine government and the current state of politics happening there. So this was pretty revelatory for me, and like throughout the film, I was like the internal dialogue in my head throughout the film was about, oh my god, this is so similar to what we're facing here. I mean, although it's a bit more extreme there, at least from what I understood going by the documentary, but I couldn't help but make form like all these uh, all these patterns that would relate to what's happening in our political landscape right now compared to what was depicted on screen. So for me, it was more of it was a very hallucinatory watch. It was pretty chilling, like bone chilling, and seeing Maria Resa's somehow not let her guard up, or stand her guard and stay positive and resilient throughout it, gave me a lot of hope. Like I felt like, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback here just for a minute.
I think we can
Yeah,
unmute.
yeah. So yeah, like it was a very hopeful documentary. It was bleak at times, but even then, it's very much a need of the hour uh, documentary. I feel like it should get a lot more press. I feel like there should be like a standard screening in any school right now. At least as someone like who at least for every person with a Twitter handle in our country right now, uh, it should be like a case study. Uh, yeah, so I mean, I came in and out with a very I felt very attached to the story throughout the documentary, and I think that the documentary achieved its focus by that standard. Like, it's pretty much like a call to action. Uh, so yeah, I would love to hear about all of your perspectives on it.
So, Jeffrey, uh, there are some elements that, in a very direct sense, indicates certain qualities in a totalitarian regime. And lambasting critics is one of them. And if you felt it is somehow theoretically universal, it essentially is, because what happened with Duterte in the Philippines is happening in India with Narendra Modi. It happened with Trump in the United States and Bolsonaro in Brazil. So these are uh, certain qualities for a political scientist to probably decipher a particular government to be the nature of a particular government.
Yeah. I meant like the way the documentary showcases it, right? Like the way it's depicted to us, it's like it was crafted to hit all those points, and I
Exactly.
found it very emotionally riveting
True, true, true.
in that way. So
Uh, so, Kritik, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Actually, other than a bunch of headlines about it, I did not know much about what was going on in the Philippines too. So it was actually a pretty informative documentary. But what especially made an impression on me was how the documentary consistently showed how women are targeted and scapegoated, whether they support the authorities or even criticize them. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say for my first impressions. So
Mm. So, at least with some of the dictators that I have come to notice, it's usually that they have this sense of toxic masculinity of they want to assert themselves as the alpha dominant male. Um, there were uh, instances where Hitler probably showcased a sense of masculinity that was completely unnecessary and might have in some sense degraded women. And some of his policies did reflect on those thoughts. It's the same with Mussolini as well. So these are the makings of a dictator in some sense. But that is a very good observation.
by the way, since you mentioned Hitler, and one of the dumbest decisions I took was I decided to watch Triumph of the Will, which,
Okay.
apart from being really boring, there was this one really weird scene. It showed consistent cutting between entire crowds of smiling women, and this next shot was immediately of Hitler. It was really skin crawling. It's really that kind of propaganda was really in your face, and it was not subtle at all, which again kind of ties into how these kind of governments operate. They don't care about subtlety anymore.
True. And some of these films push to make Hitler look like he was a charismatic leader, and some of them, on the other hand, wanted to demonize or animalize Jews. And one documentary that I've seen in recent times as in a few months ago, was The Eternal Jew. And the narrative of the whole documentary is such that you get the impression that Jews are something outside of humans. At least that is the way the narrator constructs the whole documentary. Mm. So Vivek, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So, well, this this film is fascinating, right? It keeps you on the edge, beginning to the end, and like others have said before me, that the parallels are astonishing. And one reason we picked this film, and we try not to pick recent films. I, I I think you guys might have known that we try to avoid picking new films as much as possible, and try to focus on older films. But this being a 2020 film might be the newest film we've ever picked for a lineup. And for the simple reason being that this film has something to say, and what it has to say has to be heard right now. There's no point listening to this in perspective. Whatever's going on, we need to get a better grasp at understanding it now, so that we can find a way to uh, not be influenced by these tactics. Because let's be honest, whoever designs these propagandas and whoever uh, is responsible for it is doing a great job, because they're clearly very successful, like Nikhil said, not just in India but so on. And if we don't figure out the strategy, and we don't step in, then yeah, things will keep getting worse. And who knows if we'll still have um, brave people like Maria standing up against what they believe. Because in India, for a fact, a lot of great news institutions of the past gave in to the pressure. That on one hand, they had pressure from um, political parties to political parties or governments to show them in a good light. That is understandable. That I think most news agencies know how to handle. On the other hand, the source of income, the ads, were being pulled out for not towing the party line. So these institutions had to make a choice: either we go bankrupt or we submit to what they want us to do. And many of these institutions chose to go down that route. So yeah, to be in a position where Maria is not an easy place to be, no doubt about it. And the fact that, not only does she stand up, she sets an example. It's yeah, there's no other word to say it. She's a hero of our time. I'm sure there are other people like her, but she's definitely one to remember. So yeah, and I thought this would be interesting to look back into, seeing how page one turned around, right? Like how the landscape of journalism was changed once and for all in 2009 to 2010. And then how this new media was adopted by the powers who want to influence people, to spread propaganda, to topple governments. The strategy behind it, a lot of that is uncovered in this film. So I thought it was a very important film, and one that we should be aware of today, and not in the future. That's why we decided to go for this.
So, in terms of Maria Ressa being a hero is not an overstatement. She won a well-deserved Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, I was very pleased to hear that.
Mm. And so, by the way, if anyone of you wants any of your heroes to win Nobel Prizes, we might probably help with that. We can probably curate a documentary.
You're blowing your trumpet too loud.
So, about my initial reaction, the entire documentary had two very important elements for me. One, it stuck to its narrative, and the narrative was such that you have two parallel streams running together. One is the government and the public reaction to the uh, uh, Rappler's journalism, investigative journalism, and on the other hand, you have Rappler's internal struggles and the way and the need to cope with the current political and social climate. So that was carried excellently well. And the second part was uh, to pick a bit from Vivek's earlier point. It was done for the current time, and it was made not as a historical piece, but as a documentary to bring some sense of alert. And it's not just the way the narration was structured, it was also the art direction. If there are some of you who watch walks, infotainment videos, so you can see a close relation with the art direction. The nodes jumbling about in the on the screen, and the lines going about here and there. I don't think I can speak a lot coherently beyond that, but you have the art direction which appeals to the current generation, which probably is resonating of the intention of the director herself. So it was an excellent documentary, and I guess we can probably go back and forth with page one and a thousand cuts just as a sense of retrospective, if that's fine with everyone. So, Mohammed, would you like to add something about the state of journalism,
Mm,
or any reaction you got from our brief conversation?
Yeah, the first point you mentioned, Nikhil, that how this media project these personalities like Modi and other government personalities.
Hmm.
Yesterday itself, I had this one debate with my colleague that how I am a blind follower of Modi,
Hmm.
and what the situation is currently in our country about the price rates and all, edible oil, petrol.
Hmm.
So we had a quite a hot debate, and at the end, I could realize and reflect on my foolery. Means how I was. It's
Hmm.
not that Modi is bad or good, nothing. But it should be, as a citizen, as an intellectual person, I shouldn't be blindly following or only see him through the lenses of some journalist, some editor in a newspaper. I
Hmm.
shouldn't be. It happened, even Mamta Banerjee. I was just questioning that because I have seen the scenes, and I told him that see what she is doing, and he said that how come, means how much are you sure that whatever you are seeing the in the channels is true? And he also added that first of all, people voted her, means the local people do are being benefited by her policies. So definitely she might be some, definitely she'll be doing some ground level work, we don't know. But don't try to judge her, don't try to portray her only through these media lenses. And it's really important for us, and the question also came about the how we should also encourage the opposition parties, so that there is a balance in our government, or else it's really dangerous for us, we should have a strong opposition party too, but this but coming to media, it's very difficult, one or the other way they are being funded by this government or other agencies. So they will be biased, they will try to extend, they would try to uh, somehow uh, spread their propaganda related to their parties. So yeah, media is very difficult, especially news media. And yeah, and we lack knowledge about this media and how it functions, and what all who are the stakeholders and what their intentions are. It's really important, and we must have a good talk on this, so that at least we'll be educating ourselves first.
So, Mohammed, slightly to contradict you with your initial point there.
Mhm.
So, the journalists and the uh, media houses are binoculars to these politicians. I mean, we elect them, but we have no other sense of control to them, on them.
Mhm.
It's only 5 years later that they come back to us for votes.
Mhm.
So these journalists, when they do their jobs properly, they are our binoculars and they are our voices. So another point which might be slightly deviating from our current topic, but I'll bring it back to the discussion. So if you want to try and understand where the stakes of a particular news media is resting, you can probably backtrack their stakeholders. So, for example, if you think about Xeon, or uh, I'm guessing it's Xeon News. So it's an international news organization. And
Vion.
why on?
Vion.
Thank you, thank you.
Isn't Vion by ZTV?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay.
So Z groups are the stakeholders. So if you want to get a better perspective of who owns what, look at whose money is running in. So, for example, even with Vice, Rupert Murdoch owns a considerable stake. Rupert Murdoch owns Fox. So, for the most part, you see Vice news channel lambasting Fox News. So it's confusing, it's irritating, but at the same time, if you want a decent functioning democracy, that is something we need to do. So, bringing back the discussion to our uh, documentary here, whilst I was watching the documentary, I was thinking about how a non-profit organization, because it's mostly with these for-profit news channels that we have this issue of the owner being slightly inclined toward one political ideology or the other. With a non-profit, you might not really have a direct problem as such. I was wondering how a non-profit news channel would work in a country as deteriorated as the Philippines, or a country with a political climate as deteriorated as the Philippines.
Nikhil,
Mhm.
non-profits also need money,
True.
and like Kritik is saying, follow the money.
Hmm.
Non-profits can also be influenced.
But you have access to their finances much more directly than you have access to the finances of these media conglomerates.
Hmm. And I just wanted to address a point which Mohammed was saying
Hmm.
about the truth and the media and the propaganda. That if if the media was doing its job,
Hmm.
then we wouldn't have to question every single thing we read, because their responsibility, the whole point of being a journalist is to report the truth. And that's what we discovered, in yesterday's film, the role of journalism and things like that. So ideally, in a perfect world, yeah, the news organizations would maintain an objective distance from whatever's going on and just report the facts. You remember when all of us were kids, we used to see Doordarshan news, and it was the most boring thing there was on TV.
True.
One uncle and one auntie in the most droning, monotone voice would read out, 5 6 points, and within 20 25 minutes they're gone.
Mm.
The whole thing started changing once this 24-hour news network thing happened. Now constantly they need some content to keep eyes on the TV. So that's when they started making it more and more uh, dramatic for the sake of keeping the audience's attention. And now we've snowballed into a completely different direction.
I have question for all here. This is what I am observing with my age, means the same age group. That now most of my friends also, they are switching to YouTube channels where this person, I don't know whether they are a qualified journalist, but people are following them on YouTube's. Whereas this TV channels, news channels, their number is coming down, but they are our, means they people do watch them, but mostly our generation, they are subscribing to uh, the person on YouTube. And how will it affect? Because until 2019, I used to follow this one or two channels, and whatever they said, it I don't know, but without I didn't researched it, so I felt, yeah, he may be telling the truth. But whereas it may not be, but and how dangerous or how benefiting that may be. What do you guys think about that?
Can I answer this?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, particularly with what is happening right now, uh, there is an immense uh, rush of information every day. So if you come across a piece of news, and if you come across that piece of news on a media house that is right inclined or left inclined. So you might have to compare it with the other opposite source just to make sure, just to get a sense of how authentic the source is. In that
But
sense,
most of us don't have luxury of time
exactly,
to research it.
precisely, precisely. In such a scenario, we usually, in some sense, conform to these explanatory videos of 19 to 20 minutes, who, by the way, will also be inclined toward one political ideology or the other. So the reason I'm bringing up political ideology is because it, in some sense, directs the way we look at the governments and how we hold them questionable. For example, someone who is a strong supporter of BJP might overlook their faults with what is happening right now, but they might not have the same kind of sympathy toward Congress. In that sense,
Can I add a? Oh, sorry. Go on.
oh, okay. So in that sense, so there is a concept called Russian fire hose method of propaganda, wherein the government or the media channels bombard you with information to the point where it is exhausting to take in more information. And at this point, you simply give up. You don't. It doesn't matter to you who killed whom, or who did what, or who is corrupt of doing what. So that is the initial and main idea what is happening with multiple of these channels, and that is, as Vivek mentioned, one of the problems with these 24-hour news channels as well, except for a few who have somehow maintained their integrity. The prime example I can think of is Al Jazeera and Monde 5. So if they're watching this, I think we
Al
can get
Jazeera
some.
is largely neutral, but they're not. I used to be uh, a vocal proponent of Al Jazeera. I used to think
Mhm.
that they are a credible news network, and just because of their name, they're looked down upon. But their coverage of the big shakeup in Egypt in 2011 was
Mhm.
completely biased towards the government. And from
Interesting.
that point on, I took everything with a grain of salt. When it comes to any other topic, Asian
Mhm.
matters, European matters, American matters, they're pretty uh, down the middle. But when it comes to Middle East matters, don't depend on Al Jazeera to provide you facts.
Interesting. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
In that sense,
I,
would it be the same with their own government as well, because they're funded by the Qatari government?
By a prince, not by a government.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Sorry, Jeffrey. You can talk.
so I used to be very active on Twitter. I think close to 6 months back for my news. So what I would do is I would follow certain journalists that I whose voice I trust, like say for these matters, like say Rana Ayub or Raghu Karnal, uh, wo- or people from the Siddharth Varadarajan, or Danya Rajendran. So basically I used to very like heavily censor people. Like I would follow rather than following a certain organization, because each organization, each like even like say all your major news houses like Republic, TOI or whatnot, all of them have uh, a bias ingrained within the company culture. uh,
True.
it's part and parcel of being, unless you're a subscriber, unless you're working on a subscriber model. But even then, like even media outlets like The Wire and Caravan have received. I don't think Caravan has received any. Like I can't think of a particular incident right now, but this subscriber-based outlets tend to have a lot more neutrality, like in their coverage in general. Like I mentioned with News Laundry and Caravan and The Wire. Even The Wire has, from what I've heard, it tends to lean more towards the left, uh, which I can't possibly think of examples for right now. But like from what friends have
I
heard
think there
in
was
the
this
journals and so forth.
Tablighi Jamaat and the Kumbh Mela, and there was extensive coverage of the Kumbh Mela, which probably pissed off a lot of right wingers.
Yeah, and like it's very hard to like uh, even with the Twitter thing also, like I found it very debilitating after a while to keep track of the news. Even same with Reddit. Like it's hard to have a like, and I don't consume news via TV, so TV or newspaper. I didn't have a subscription at the time, so I used to heavily consume from Reddit and Twitter, and it does screw with your mind if you don't know it. It's a very easy way to I mean, you can be misled easily, and it plays with your emotional reasoning too, like because of the way news is being consumed and how you see it propagate on Twitter. Like, be it the comments under a certain person's like our discourse as a nation has become so polarizing that it's almost like uh, a lot of people are like say even with our social gatherings it's hard to talk about the news without being labeled one thing or the other now. So like I mean I'm speaking for like particularly my specific social circles, but
Mhm.
like it's gotten so bad that just in general I think being in the middle class, upper middle class, just bringing up the news in your own social circles is like a turn off now, and that itself has a lot to say about how we are headed as a nation going forward, and especially since the start of the pandemic, right? Things have only escalated so much because I think not even during before the pandemic, but I would say maybe around the time the JNU uh, riots happened, maybe 2019. Uh, sometime around maybe since
Oh, the Delhi
2014,
riots,
I
I guess
guess.
you're speaking of.
The Delhi riots, my bad.
Mm.
Yeah, so my bad for misplacing it. Yeah, so yeah, like these things happen. So like all these incidences have been happening back to back that you even lose your sense of time if you keep following through on it, because you're not even given the space to fully what do you call understand one issue before the other issue pops up. And with our country, that's been the ruling government's main what do you call strategy, right? To prop up distractions one way or the other.
Mm.
So not to get too political in this discussion, but I mean, considering theme, you can't help but get to like talk about it, right? And all of this is my personal opinion. So if anything, if this video gets a lot of brickbats, then
You will go
I
to the
apologize. I apologize in advance. And yeah, but yeah, it's even as an informed, even to stay as an informed citizen in today's world, uh, it's really hard. It's really hard to do that and preserve your sanity. Uh, so it's crazy. I guess that's all I have to say. And it's really inspiring to see. Like I have a huge respect for the profession of journalism in general, because dialogue is what really drives a nation forward. And you have, I mean, journalists, the media, and journalism is just one like is the way what do you call the gateway to uh, the gateway to starting these dialogues. And and even like, and just to drop another point, it doesn't the profession doesn't pay in India, like not as much as it does in more developed countries. So it's a lifelong struggle to keep doing this. And like just I mean, that's probably why I was like, that's why I stressed on how I was emotionally what do you call it, like why I found why I was emotionally engaged with the documentary, rather than just rather than just an ethno, like eth- I didn't see it as just an ethnographic what do you call take. Like I could like I found it much more resonating because of just how like you mentioned, how universal it is for us. I mean, for the whole world right now. And yeah, like it's hard to stay hopeful about the world in these matters, but you have to. And and Resa's story was inspiring in that sense, and it makes you want to strive to become, like, more informed and try to support more, like, try to come to a point where I can support some space, like some space or the other through, in my own little way as well specifically. So yeah.
So I'll just read out Anandita's point on. I'm not sure what it's following, but middle class India barely cares about anyone but themselves. Middle class India, being mostly cast as Hindu, absolutely no credibility and reliability. Way too self absorbed, they are a disappointment. And she says she's with Jeffrey on this, supposing it's with his earlier point, and probably way too political for YT too.
I don't I don't think it's too political. Even if it is political, there's nothing wrong with it, because this entire talk or this entire film is political. So I mean,
I
all of
think
us
in
can.
that sense, on a relative scale, we are the least political over there.
No, I'm saying whatever beliefs you hold, right? Talk about the film in through that perspective, and let's hear those ideas. Doesn't matter if it's controversial or not. I mean, as long as we all stay respectful of each other and it doesn't go into a shouting match, I think we're okay. So,
Can I highlight one aspect of the documentary that I feel like that I feel has like a lot of talking points and resonance? I think we can start from there.
Please do, please do.
So there was this point in the, like, we're told throughout the movie about how about Duterte's acts, and how these uh, how a lot of people are being killed on the ground level, purely for, again, these are all consequences of systemic issues that are being dealt with, and only the lower level people, I wouldn't say the enforcers, rather the consumers of drugs who get uh, killed for it. And at one point, Ressa stresses on the kind of backgrounds that they come from, which is the more marginalized parts of the Philippines. And this brought, like, this came, like, the one thought that came to mind is the caste discrimination happening in India right now. How marginalized voices don't get that kind of press in our mainstream media, and even when they do, it's purely, like, it's mostly fetishized. Sorry to use the word, but it's like the violence done against them is fetishized. Even with like how, like, say, but cases of sexual, like, rape cases are covered in our media. It's done to, what do you call it? They're written and they're framed in such a way to sensationalize the audience, to get the audience to click on the article. There's a always, I think there's a really bad trend I've seen with our like, with a lot of major news networks in our Indian news networks, is they put a graphic. In some cases, they even out the names of, like, like such ethical guidelines are not being followed, and it's something that I've noticed. And seeing her talk about these things with such sensitivity in the documentary, it did get me to, like, what you call. I mean, I felt that should be discussed, like, and shed some light on. What are your thoughts on this? Like,
So there are two very strong distinctions between the kind of media channel that is portrayed in the documentary and the one that I guess you mentioned. You were mostly talking about the 24-hour news channels, and in some sense,
not
sadly,
exactly, not exactly. I have, like, it's not just the 24-hour news channels. It's also, yeah, it also has to do with a lot of outlets, like online only outlets in our country. I don't know if I should be naming names right now. I don't know if that's fair, but like, I mean, I'm just going
You
by
can you can go ahead with
headlines.
examples just to stay on the safer side.
Jeff,
Uh,
you can change your name in the settings and then say whatever you want to say.
no. I mean, I don't think our video will get that much.
Yeah, there's only some
Not
maybe
to
40, 50 people who watch anyways, so it's not that.
yeah, I mean, I didn't mean it. I don't mean it like that because I'm not like, I'm also going by I don't have case, like, I don't have any immediate names that come to mind right now.
Thank God.
You
Okay,
can call, yeah,
that's
it's
a good
purely
thing.
rhetoric. Yeah, I mean, when, like, to bring an example, when Hathras happened, when the Hathras case happened,
Hmm.
the coverage of the issue was horribly handled by a lot of outlets, and I heard about it on Instagram of all places from independent outlets. Sorry, I heard about the situation from independent outlets, meaning like the more like non TV. I mean, from the, like, I think I remember it being picked, it taking like up to 4 or 5 days until before it was taken up by the mainstream media, and before I even saw a news clip about it on TV or YouTube. So, like, that's the kind of insensitivity that's shown to these issues in our country. So even with and like, let's not even go into the, like, I don't want to get started on the Modi hating immediately, because I mean the Modi comparisons immediately, because it's
Hmm.
the obvious parallel is obvious, but I felt this one deserves more nuance, like this one aspect of our this thing, because, like I mentioned earlier, how most outlets these days, I mean, sorry, most of the mainstream outlets these days have that bias, have their own brand, quote unquote brand of news to cover in a certain way or whatnot. And how that informs and distracts. I mean, how that what's the opposite of this? Oh, okay, how that miscommunicates the nature of the news to the wide audiences who consume that, and in turn changes the dialogue of the country. That's very it's very frightening. It's a huge ripple effect that I feel is not uh, being brought to light. And I can't think of a solution to this, like possible solution to this within our discussion or whatnot. But I would love to hear any of your takes on it, and um, how we could combat this. Like, even with what I mentioned earlier, with like talking about the news in your own social circles is like a big no-no right now. Yeah, like in most of our, like, I mean, it's come down to that. Like, the news has been enough so polarizing that I've heard instances where uh, some of my friends don't even talk about the daily news with their parents, because they are afraid of, like, no, not afraid, they, because of the fights that, you know, happen out of it.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like, that's something that had me worried. That's something that got me off Twitter also. Like, I couldn't take it beyond a point.
So, Jeffrey, uh, I mean, before I make my point, Samatha is here. So, Samatha, would you like to give your initial reactions of the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I was, by the way, sorry, I've been unmuted, possibly creating some noise. I'm sitting under a fan. I apologize
Oh,
for that. I was just stunned by the documentary. It was, I mean, I didn't know much about the person, the protagonist, until I saw this documentary. And I don't have anything to say in a broader sense, but there are many small points that I liked, and I'll possibly catch on as you guys talking about things. One thing I couldn't, one thing that kept bothering me throughout the documentary was, why is this guy going after? I mean, somehow I'm not convinced that, you know, I don't know what his reason is for going after the drug. people. Because normally when you have a leading dictator like this, there'll be some vested interest in going after a certain section of society,
Oh,
right?
that
So, for
is
example,
usually a politically advertising point. So in our country, we are going after our neighboring countries, and we push all our problems as a root of our involvement with them, our interaction with them. So
unless
drugs
you
is
are picking up
one.
an excuse, you're saying.
Hmm?
Basically, they're picking up an excuse, you're saying, to.
Exactly, exactly. Trump had that with the Mexicans and Muslims.
Yeah, because when I look at the character of the person. In what again, I'm not judging, but by
Mhm.
looking at his past and how he conducts himself in public and how proud he is of killing people and things like this, how different is he from somebody like a drug lord, right? In terms of moral whatever. So why would a person like this even be interested in making the world a better place? That was the thing that was bothering me. What is the real motivation behind this? But I guess you clarified it. A lot of such leaders, I guess, find something to get the following of a certain section of society, right, to stay in power. So I guess that's all is happening. Thanks for clarifying that. But overall, I was just amazed by her personality and how she has kept going with her cause. It's just a phenomenal person. I don't have, and it's like I can't find words to describe what she's doing, her agenda, how much she has stuck onto it. And I don't know what the story is on now. If the case is still in litigation or she's in jail or like what's going on there. But
So she won the Nobel Peace Prize for
correct, yeah.
2021. Mm.
But is she, back in Manila, she's technically convicted, right? So I don't know what's up with that. If that's an ongoing battle, legal battle, or if she's in jail or like what.
Most likely. That is what I'm supposing, so because at least seven of those cases, in one of those seven cases, will convict her. Sadly.
Same. Sad, yeah, sad. But yeah, those are my initial impressions. So I'll be
Mm.
happy to listen to anyone else and I'll keep jumping in if people have questions.
Okay.
So
So
Samartha,
mm,
the way they pick the target is they find the lowest common denominator point, which
Yeah,
will attract a lot of attention.
yeah,
It doesn't have to appeal to everybody, but it has to appeal to enough people to form a majority opinion. So
yep,
in every
yep.
country, there's a different issue which is being targeted, and yeah, I guess
I think even the current president or prime minister of Mexico rallied under the same political talking point. He insisted that he will eradicate the drug problem in Mexico.
hmm,
I'm guessing it's Almo. It's an abbreviation for a much longer name.
Yeah. But at least in the case of Mexico, like it's such a, I don't know how to put it, but it's a legitimate social cause to go after because it's like such a rampant. I don't know what, I guess I'm not educated enough to say what the problem is like in the Philippines, but when you look at the character of this person, when he's brazenly saying how he, you know, I don't think he says he enjoys, but he's proud of that fact and things like this, right? And the things he alludes to in the speech, why would this guy try to play a I am holier than thou and I'm queen of society type of thing? But I guess both of you made a point. I agree with the lowest common denominator thing because that word was being used even in the case of other political leaders, not naming any, but populist leaders, so to speak.
I want to add a
I
brief extension to that point, but I think I want to address Jeffrey's point before that.
I
Is
have
that
an observation to make,
go ahead?
if I may, or
Yeah.
if there's a thread you're trying to wrap up, you can do that.
Okay, I'll finish up with Jeffrey's point. I wanted to talk about that.
Sure.
Uh,
Then I'll start a new one. Yeah.
yeah, sure. So, Jeffrey, I think we are at a very tumultuous stage right now in regard to our news consumption. So, like Vivek said, we were at a phase, we were at least born during a time when the maximum amount of time we spent with the media was about 25 to 30 minutes. And that was with the DD channel, which was a state-sponsored news organization. But as times, as new private news channels kept popping up, it on the outside it seems like there are new voices that are bringing out new and fresh perspectives, but at the same time it is overloading the consumers. And this is what essentially happens with the Russian fire hose propaganda mechanism as well, the one that I mentioned earlier. So uh, I'm a slightly more optimistic about this because we are probably coming in terms with the fact that we have an immense amount of information, and it's not just the current world that is in some sense ripe and full of information, but it was the same case with our history as well. But there was not enough coverage, and there was not enough information for us to for them to load up on back then. So why I think this is a tumultuous stage is because this is a defining point for us to either consume all the news streams that are at our disposal, or pick and select. And with the example Mohammed mentioned, I think we are already doing the latter with picking out a few YouTube channels and going through the video essays. So I think most of you might be familiar with Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. So that is one kind. I mean, he is made it very apparent that he's not being a journalist in any form or fashion, but what he's doing is somehow bordering on journalism. It is in some sense holding the representatives and people in charge accountable, at least in some form or fashion, if not directly.
But there has also been criticism of John Oliver on a
Absolutely.
technical level. No, on a technical level. This
With their coverage?
No. About the way the show is presented. This was pointed out to me by a friend of mine who's an editor.
There was also very biased coverage of Venezuela as well.
I'm not talking about bias.
Okay.
I'm just talking in the way the show is structured. It is designed to make you agree with him. I'll just point out the criticism because it is slightly fascinating, regardless of which side of the political compass you belong in. So, my friend said, from an editing standpoint, what they do is they pick up a serious news topic. Then, just by the time you're beginning to absorb it, assuming you're not reading the news, your first source of information is this.
True.
Just by the time you're beginning to understand the shape of this topic, he will pick up a joke with a visual comparison on the left side of the screen, and there'll be a laughter track. And what laughter track does to you subconsciously is it gives you the simulation of a company of hundreds of people laughing with you. And that's what comedy shows have been doing for decades, that when you hear a laughter track, subconsciously we are compelled, we feel compelled to laugh. So before you fully understood the topic, you started laughing with the audience. And by doing that, you've not fully understood the topic, but since you've already found a side, you're already laughing, you've taken a side before you understood it. And then he said they've done it, they've figured out the precision, like how many frames gap there should be between one story and the next story. That's how precise they are with John Oliver's program. So yeah, he makes entertaining content, no doubt about it, but it is also engineered to make you feel a certain way.
True.
Also, just to add to that, I don't like John Oliver's and even Hassan Minaj show, Patriot Act. I think it was on Netflix for like 2 seasons. They don't tend to give the proper nuance to global issues that is necessary.
So they have a
And it's
sense
not
of escape
possible
in
in a
that.
30 minute slot.
They have a sense of escape where they don't classify themselves as news channels in any degree, but they classify themselves
Yeah,
as variety shows, variety talk
yeah,
shows.
yeah. So it's hard to consume it with that level of like. I mean, it's just a. I mean, I don't know if it counts as a pet peeve or it's just a general what do you call guideline I would give to someone who does receive news that way. That like what would help is maybe consuming that while also participating in some forum that discusses it. Like for example, the last week tonight subreddit has a lot of posts. People post criticism, like they discuss they discuss the topics of that week in hand in detail, or they add some nuance to the discussions. Like I remember when I think Patriot Act covered, I think Patriot Act covered NRC, the CA NRC once, and it was hyped up as this huge big deal. But in the end, that it in the end when and like it got a lot of what do you call like I remember being on Twitter around the time this was being marketed, and there was a huge like because around the time the issue hadn't caught up in the world news. I mean, among outside of India. So, but in the end, the show didn't cover the issue for like more than I don't know like it didn't give the right coverage to the issue, and it was more or less name dropped. I would say, like and that and it was like my point being that the format of these shows don't quite give the right level of nuance and uh, time needed to flesh out the issue or to discuss all the implications or all the dates on it,
True.
implications of their actions and what is currently being done. And you can't really fault them because they're also trying to keep it lighthearted or try to derive some humor out of it, or like by by punching up. Sorry, but yeah, it's like I would consume it for entertainment. I wouldn't consume it for information.
True.
Uh, and like I would compare it to say like how I would consume a podcast about movies rather than a video essay about it. So a critical essay about movies. So,
If I remember correctly, these stream of shows, John Oliver's and uh, who's the other person who usually he usually gets Neil deGrasse Tyson on his talk show.
oh, I don't know that guy.
Okay,
Joe
so
Rogan.
huh?
Joe Rogan. I don't know.
No, not Joe
I don't
Rogan,
think
but
Joe Rogan counts. Yeah.
yeah. So they were sort of influenced by Jon Stewart, who came into the prime with his coverage on the
Yeah.
9/11 attacks.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying, it's usually what happens with the overflow of information and the overflow of news is we tend to incline ourselves towards these kinds of platforms, which don't necessarily classify themselves as news channels, but they are a bit more um, light-hearted
But do you think
for
that
our
is a cop
consumption.
out?
Hmm?
Do you think that is a cop out, that they're using this entertainment label as a license to shake away the responsibility of a news channel might have?
So
Absolutely, because he's well aware of the influence he's having,
Hmm. And they talk
especially
about
John
current
Oliver with.
events. They
Huh?
don't talk about,
No, there was direct coverage of a lot of current events as well. I
like
think.
they are doing news, but they're pretending. I mean, obviously they're providing some entertainment value, but to say that
Mm,
they're strictly an entertainment show and not a news show, is also not correct.
I think
And this
it
is
works as a like I said, I think it works as content because they're primarily made for an American audience or a Western audience. And the thing is, Western, like in their uh, popular, I mean, their global issues don't really take up a lot of their space, and especially if you're like and it's very like
Unless
these
the
should.
US Army is involved in it.
Yeah, and especially like these shows are the kind of like they serve as an outlet through which they like one can start a dialogue about these things. Like I don't know, like I think I can't recall the exact episodes of John Oliver right now, but there has been positive responses through his shows. I think with I can't remember exact examples, but I've read about.
There was one with net neutrality, and there was one with the
Yeah,
uh, televangelists,
exactly. Yeah. So the net neutrality one, and there was also one with the your with
robocalls.
I can't remember the exact episode. It's been over a year since I watched an episode. But
The
there has been positive
robocalls.
outcomes
Hmm.
from the shows. So I don't think it's fair to cancel out the. Like I feel India needs more of those shows to entice our middle class or our general audience to care. Like I think Kunal Kamra used to do this. Kunal Kamra and the Being Human channel
We need
did
the
this to an
cultural.
extent.
We need the First Amendment culture to have something akin to John Oliver's show.
Yeah, like because I mean that's the thing. Like I even me as a general consumer, I don't want to consume the news to the point where I like go full ADD on it, like or follow the issue, ev- follow each and every issue as a general audience, right? I mean, I would feel attached to some issues more than the others, but I would still want to be informed about what else is happening in the country. Like, for example, even with this documentary, I wouldn't have known anything about Philippines if I hadn't watched this documentary. And this documentary must have left out some details. Some like, I mean, if I were a Filipino person watching this, I don't think I would appreciate this to the same extent that we are right now as outsiders. So these shows, Patriot Act and Last Week Tonight, serve the same purpose for Western audiences. I don't think it's up to like I don't think we should give it a lot of credence if they decide to cover our issues tomorrow. And I don't think like I should we should consume those shows knowing that there's still a lot there's still knowing that there's still a lot more to know learn about I mean, to not see it as the sole, what do you call, information source, I would say,
But
just to phrase it
Jeffrey,
correctly.
what happens with these shows is that they're structured in such a way, like Vivek mentioned, engineered in such a way that you feel like you have a wholesome sense of understanding of the topic, despite not really having the least amount of knowledge of what is happening. That is essentially what happened with the Venezuela coverage. I
Yeah,
don't think I
yeah.
should call it coverage because he
We
doesn't
had
class.
we had a similar debate of this source, this type the time we discussed the last documentary. I think the I'm sorry, the urbanized documentary,
Hmm.
right? Where like we are shown different examples to give a just a general view of a subject to get a general idea of a subject, or even though we won't remember details like 2 or 3 weeks after the watch. But it does inform us a little bit, like Ritik mentioned on that discussion. It does like even though we both disagreed with him there at that time, uh, like knowing what we are consuming something for as a viewer would help us better appreciate its value. That's what I would end with, because my point is that we should always vet our sources, and we should always go in with a critical thinking mindset,
True.
whatever we consume.
True.
I'm
Uh,
not saying those
the,
shows don't have value.
yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely not.
and the fact that they're
Let
engineered
those
is
shows,
because, like, to
let
answer
them do whatever
Vivek's,
they want. Let them, let them engineer their show.
yeah,
Ultimately,
yeah,
they're
definitely,
doing
like,
it for views.
yeah,
The
like,
opposite side may say they're doing it for propaganda, but in the end, everything is about money. So they're probably
True.
doing it for views to retain as long as viewership as they probably can.
Yeah,
My
no,
problem is with them covering news and not calling themselves a news source. They're shaking
Exactly.
away that responsibility. And I'll give you a non-political example of this, so that you can put it into context why this responsibility is important. So back in 2006 or 7, um, Tesla was about to release their car, not even release, about to unveil their car. They sent one of the cars to Top Gear. Some of you may know this story. Top Gear, you know, they have a very strong um, love for petrol engines, and they completely made fun out of the Tesla sports car. Even though the Tesla car is a great car in its own, they specifically made the episode look like this is an unreliable, over-engineered piece of gadget, not a real car. And even the tests that they did were falsified. And Tesla took it very seriously because they were hoping this would be great press to get a nod from Top Gear. What else could you ask for your first car launch? So they took Top Gear to court, and Top Gear's excuse was that we are not a news channel; we are an entertainment channel. Sorry, entertainment show. People watch us because of the personality of our host and the comedy that they provide. We are not obliged to provide any facts. And guess what? Top Gear won that case. It's a shame
okay.
because uh, they are informing the public about what these cars are, what is the gear ratio, what is the rubber band effect, all that nonsense they keep harping on about, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
people are learning about cars from Top Gear, no doubt about it. But they are shaking away all responsibility, saying that if something goes wrong, don't call us news because we're not obliged to provide you with facts. So I have a problem with that. So yeah, these entertainment shows, and I really like Jon Stewart, by the way, but I still think his show should have taken the responsibility of calling itself as a news source.
Also, John Stewart's like the nature of John Stewart's show. I think like he used to broadcast like five nights a week, right? Compared to the his I wouldn't his successors who do like one episode a week.
Mhm.
So the nature of that, I mean, I think that itself would change the nature of how their content is being consumed now, right? And I don't know, like I don't have a right, like I don't have a complete answer to this because I personally classify these shows as satire, also, like news, informative satire. And satire is very much political satire is very much needed uh, in to like to so quote unquote punch up uh, the the what do you call it? The people responsible people at hand, because it like it provides it does provide some level of catharsis to the viewer and the people engaging with the subject, and it also builds some perspective. There is some grounding and comparison done there, right? Even with the way humor is brought into these shows, into these particular shows, the I mean there is some reduction involved. There is some nuances lost, but what John Stewart and his contemporaries are doing is they are trying to give you a bigger picture of what this person represents and why you should oppose him and why this matters or why this problem matters. And that perspective, everyday news, the news shows and websites don't have the time to do that. They don't give us that perspective that we need to do that. and that's why I still feel like, even for all its faults, I still believe that they have a reason to exist, and they, like, I don't think these things like this should be held against them. Like, it's a show after all. It's a streaming show. I think the John Oliver show is HBO Max thing, right?
True.
Yeah, so all their shows are done in that sense, like done with that level of research and data analytics and all of that, all of those things play into it. There's nothing today, even our news cycle, Republic or whatnot, all of these shows, our daily news cycle, all the graphics we see in our news channels are done in a way to entice our attention. If you like, there's a lot of color theory being brought into it. Red and blues are the most attractive colors, so that's why all our news channels follow that. Like, if we go into that, if we extend your argument to everything that we consume, then we would inevitably find faults with how shows or all of this content is designed to keep us engaged. So I don't know how I can, like, I can't really disassociate one thing from the other. Rather, you can just, I mean, I as a viewer, I try to understand the intents and purposes behind all these what do you call it? All these shows and the creators, and I decide to view the show depending on that, knowing that I know that I'll disagree with a certain point if it comes up, if it doesn't hold any, if it doesn't make any sense, or if it's misrepresented, and it's okay. Like, at least that will get pointed out by the community that the show has. So that's all I have to say. Like, I know it's not a satisfactory answer, uh, but I don't think, like, discussions of these sorts, I don't think will ever come out with a satisfactory answer, so
True.
to speak. Even I still struggle with this, like, personally speaking, because like, when I'm reading up, or when I'm reading up about big, like, when I'm reading up about a news item that's taken up their spaces, whatever, like the current news or whatnot. Getting some grounded perspective takes time, takes valuable time out of our hands, and it's a matter of how much time you're willing to give to the subject to get that, nuance. Which is why I feel it's harder today to get that nuance, because of all these varied sources and their biases and so on and so forth.
So one thing before I think right after I finish my point, Vivek can probably introduce his observation.
Kritik
Uh,
actually made a very good point in the chat. Kritik, do you want to bring it up? If you're there, Kritik. I think he's not there. Sorry, Nikhil, go on.
yeah,
Hello?
yeah. Hi.
Nothing. I thought it was about me and I just came back from somewhere.
No, Vivek was talking about the point
Yeah,
you
you
made.
made a good point in the chat, no? So do you want to bring it up?
Oh no, yeah, it was. It was the same. Again, I got this from the last week Tonight Show, and he mentioned that Tucker Carlson also used the same argument that he is an entertainment personality, and you cannot hold him responsible for any claims of fake news or whatever. So yeah, even news organizations are using that excuse.
And they do it in
If
newspapers also. They call it op-ed. Most of the content is op-ed. That's how
no,
they
but the
give you.
responsibility goes away from the news organization to the editor or the person who wrote the op-ed column. So there is still some sense of accountability, but here I think that is essentially lost.
But
Uh,
Nikhil, the point being, they want to, highlight a particular viewpoint
mhm,
with the authority of a news platform without using the word news.
without claiming responsibility. True.
Right. So all of them, whether it's newspaper, John Oliver or Tucker Carlson, all of them are, giving you news without calling themselves news. And that is a problem.
True. One aspect of Last Week Tonight I'd like to appreciate is, uh, I'm guessing with every second or third episode, he insists the viewers to call up their representatives and insist on some issue being the priority of the representative over there. So that is a really good culture in a democracy, in a representative democracy.
Yeah, a call to action is always provided at the end of the episode.
True.
Like at least he rallies, he uses his community to like his advantage
True.
for good causes, and that's more than what I can say for a lot of other entities.
True. Speaking of, I wanted to get back to a certain point of the documentary. But before I do that, I want to listen to Vivek's observation. I think we interrupted him a lot, many times.
No, I interrupted your wrap up.
Oh, tit for tat.
Okay.
Sorry, Vivek.
All good. It's fine. So, watching the film for the second time, I was focused on entirely different things because I know what's going to happen. So, reading at an abstraction level of what is actually going on, trying to understand what is happening in Philippines and what can we understand uh, from an overview perspective, that this is the strategy being used in other countries. And I found a few observations, and we can talk about them. So one thing I noticed is, before the leader comes to power, he brings himself as a victim and an outsider. I use those two words because first they'll say that, oh, this guy is not from the political class, so he doesn't stand a chance. And victim because they'll say that, oh, the big politicians of this big city will never let him win. And I'm strictly talking about Philippines right now. Any comparisons you make are your own. So they start off being a victim and an outsider. So this makes people believe that, you know what, this guy is actually a voice of the nation, and he might be a simpleton, but whatever he says is straight from the heart. So we should give this guy a chance. Same thing has happened multiple times. Second point, they make populist statements. They say every single thing that people want to hear. They'll say every single thing that will, like Samartha brought up, the lowest common denominator statement to gather as many people as possible. Then once they have the popular audience, they promise revenge. They promise revenge on some marginalized or minority community, or some group of people who are an easy target at the present time. Then when such things are questioned, next point is they sow seeds of doubt. And the film does a very good job of explaining this, that they don't need to be right. They just need to make you doubt the truth. That is all. And they do this with propaganda, that even if the fact comes out, they will confuse you so much that you don't know what to believe. Like Nikhil said, it's the fire hose thing, which I didn't know about. I'm happy to learn new information. Then next point is they have an obsession with loyalty. And I'm not entirely sure why they have this obsession with loyalty.
Loyalty is essentially conformity.
I thought it might be because they in their heart they know what they're doing is completely off the charts wrong, but loyalty gives you impunity that at least these people will not go against me.
Yeah, so if
In Trump's case,
the
it was
majority of
definitely
the
the case.
population is conforming to whatever you're doing,
Hmm.
regardless of on what side of the uh, moral spectrum it falls on,
Yeah,
you don't really have to be answerable to them,
yeah,
which is essentially the case. Which is essentially what happened with Trump with a lot of Republicans. They didn't even consider him to be the things he did to be impeachable.
hmm.
So that is a sense of conformity.
Yeah,
It's essentially a cult
yeah.
for that reason.
The next point was undermining rule of law and institutions through calls of righteousness. That they will do semi-legal things or completely illegal things, and they'll justify it that this is the right thing to do regardless of what the law says. And yeah, so these are the observations I made in my second viewing. So we can talk about any of these points
I'd
if it,
like to add one tiny point to these qualities, if I may. Uh,
please.
so uh, it's essentially a universal aspect, despite your insistence that you wanted to limit the points to utilitarian the Philippines.
No, I'm
But
reading out my observations from the film.
absolutely,
So
but it
all the
has
parallels that we have noticed in other countries
it
are
has a universal sense to it, despite
that's that's what I said. I wanted to get an abstraction level point because these are being repeated in other countries, including
true,
our own.
true. But additional to that, you have uh, another class of I'm not sure if I can call them totalitarians, but uh, who somehow mimic some of these qualities, but they're not as aggressive as their contemporaries. One prime example is Boris Johnson. He seems, in some sense, goofy. That probably might be his general personality, but he seems goofy. And he seems like he is exhibiting a cult of personality that is foreign to the general British population. But yet, he is involved in a lot of uh, um, policies which reflect the same kind of policies these totalitarians do. So,
Are you talking about the UK Prime Minister?
yeah, the UK Prime Minister
I
Boris
had
Johnson.
a conversation with a British friend of mine about this, and
Mhm.
he said, I made a joke that somebody should gift him a comb someday.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
he said, no, no, no. Even if you gift it, he won't use it
That is
because
on
that is a
purpose.
part of the act.
Mm.
The haircut is made to disarm you, to make you think that he's just,
It's
a
not.
buffoon.
Mm.
And that made sense. In fact, when Facebook was called into hearing, Mark Zuckerberg, a lot of people made fun of Mark Zuckerberg's haircut.
Mhm.
And what that did was it takes away the conversation from the real points. You start,
True.
talking about jokes instead of talking about facts. So, yeah, haircut is also used as a tool in propaganda.
I think that a similar aspect was criticized in Donald Trump as well. His hair. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it was brought up regularly, but there was a debate about whether his hair was a wig or actually his own.
But Samartha will attest to this.
Hmm.
Donald Trump's hair has been a matter of jokes long before he was president. People you
Oh,
always
even
made jokes
on the
about
phone.
it.
Yeah, yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, there's a Seth MacFarlane show where I guess you guys might have heard of Seth MacFarlane, right? The Family
Yeah,
Guy.
yeah,
Uh, there's this. So actually, Comedy Central has this amazing thing called the roast, where they bring a celebrity and then they basically humiliate them. It's all in good taste, but it's like it can go pretty wild, and it's really funny.
yeah.
Like it's really funny. So they brought Donald Trump and Seth MacFarlane started by saying, once there was a man who was a hardworking, self-made millionaire. That man is called Fred Trump, Donald's dad. Okay, that's how he started the whole thing. And then he said, "I have one request and one request only. Can I put my hands on your hair and just ruffle it up like crazy, just to make sure it's not a wig?" He did that. He actually, Donald said yes, and he did that, and it wasn't a wig, or either it was a wig that was very firmly held, or it was not a wig, right? But I agree with Vivek. I think his people have called it bird's nest and all sorts of things. But I wanted to appreciate the point that Vivek made about distraction. Or diversion. I think diversion is a better word for it.
Mm,
Where
mm,
celebrities use they want to get the heat off of them, so to speak, and get people talking about their hair and all sorts of irrelevant points, so that it really helps, I guess, because the main issues, they say this about Elon Musk too, like he comes up every now and then and makes some really bizarre remark about dogs, or like just crazy tweets, that make no sense. And some people have theorized that he's doing that because he's having issues with the company itself, like it could be financial issues or major issues that are cropping up, and he wants to divert attention. So I want to appreciate that point because I think it's used as a strategy more often than we realize, right? Because at our ends, we just tend to laugh at these things or get entertained by it. But I think it's very carefully crafted public image and strategy.
Um, I wanted to start a different thread of discussion. So is it fine? Okay, so I'll just go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah.
So sorry, I couldn't hear you. Your voice is a little bit low.
How about now?
Much better, much better.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
So yeah. Anyways, I wanted to talk about the nature of propaganda today, at least. You that is used by such fascist sympathizers, or who are even fascists. One and how it's all, they feed off of each other, and it doesn't make any sense. One interesting thing which I myself saw was this whole there's a lot of what do you say, uh, bad press about, or bad feeling towards George Soros, because and the people say it has roots in a kind of anti-Semitic feeling, and because he always donates to liberal institutions. And I found it very curious that this somehow bled over into India also, and now a lot of people blame large problems on George Soros, and how he's trying to what do you say, uh, pull down India or something by using these lobbies and using his billions of dollars. And and in with respect to his documentary, also this war on drugs is not a new thing. It started in US also, and I was thinking, like, in this globalized world, how the right wingers, they tend to feed off of each other and to come up with catchphrases, even though they don't make sense for their own for their context.
I have something to add to what you said. You use the word war on terror, right? You use the phrase war on terror.
I
Sorry, war on drugs,
Yeah.
um, or war on terror. Um,
Yeah, I
a
think it's
professor of mine,
exactly 50 years since the original war on drugs thing began.
a professor of mine claimed to know someone who worked in an ad agency, marketing agency, who was involved with coining the term war on terror. And she said they used to bring in batches after batches of people, completely random people, right? And I forgot what the word is, but they test out different concepts just like they do for ads.
Focus groups.
Focus group,
Fun.
yeah. So they focus tested many phrases before arriving on the word war on terror or war on drugs. Why not call it the Afghanistan war? Why not call it, the 9/11 war? So they focus test it in a way to figure out what phrasing will get the most amount of support. And they do this not just for wars, but they also do it for bills, because I think Samartha will also agree that many representatives don't read the bills. They just sign off on, what is the name of the bill. I'll give you an example.
Or
The-
whatever,
I just want
they're told to.
there was a bill. Yeah,
I just
Samartha?
sorry to interrupt. To what you were the thing you were alluding to. I was like, there's a channel called C-SPAN in the US, which basically runs Congress and Senate. Like live, like our Lok Sabha sessions live,
Yeah,
right, the
yeah.
whole day. And I'm looking at these guys talking about such in-depth details about policy.
Hmm.
I find it very hard to believe that these are the guys who actually did the nitty-gritty research work. I'm sure they have staff people,
Right, right.
tens of
They have people,
yeah,
correct.
yeah. But keep going. Sorry, I just want to say I agree with your point.
What was I saying? Sorry, I forgot.
Something war on terror and how it
How
was.
nobody actually reads the bill, and you were going to give an
Oh, right,
example.
right. Okay, okay. I'll give you an example. Okay. There was a bill, and I used to bring this up as a bar fact, right? Like going out and with friends, and we're talking about things, and I used to bring this up as a fact, just to show people how clever these people are. There was a bill called Protection of Children Against Some Predators Act, something like that, something along those lines. And so if you heard this is the name of the bill, it's 200 pages long, would you vote for it? And most of the people would say, yes, we'll vote for it. Protection of children, who can disagree with that? But if you read into the bill, the bill was something about tracking people online and maintaining some sort of database to uh, ensure that children are not harmed. So children are also used as a tool in propaganda. That it is officially called "think of the children" argument. That when you run out of arguments, you say "think of the children," and people have to, on moral grounds, uh, feel compelled to agree to that topic. So yeah, phrasing is extremely important, and a lot of money is paid to figure out the right phrasing for the right thing.
I would not.
I always figured the war on terror was actually inspired by Ronald Reagan's war on drugs. Uh,
I think it was Richard
structure.
Nixon.
Hmm?
I thought it was Nixon.
No. It was Ronald Reagan.
War on.
Who was the president in the 60s? I think it was during the 60s. You had an influx
So it
from
was
Colombia.
on 1971 when
60s was
Richard
Kennedy,
Nixon.
right?
Yeah,
Reagan
60s was
was
Kennedy.
Okay.
I
He
don't think
got
he
like
was
elected in
on
60s.
the
Kennedy.
drug
Yeah. Kennedy was during the Cuban crisis, as far
Cuban
as I
crisis.
remember, right?
So there's
Uh,
a very famous quote by Ronald Reagan. Remember the contraband or some crisis like that, right? And he said, "We do not negotiate with terrorists." I think he said something like the United States does not negotiate with terrorists, and that reminded me when you said he was. Maybe that's the connection you're talking about because there was some connection to drugs, terrorism, and contraband, which I can't remember, but that
I
came up.
think it was in relation to one of the numerous hijackings that happened.
I think there was also a Iran contra dealing thing.
Yeah. This was with the
Weapons in this.
it. I don't remember the exact details. It had to do with the drug. It had to do with the drug war in the United States at the time. It was fictionalized in American Hustle. Uh, that's the only way I know about it.
It was essentially during the Reagan era because you had a significant amount of time for the hippie era.
But though the war, I just checked up. The war on drugs was started by Richard Nixon.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry then.
Yeah, it's exactly 50 years ago, so 71.
Oh, okay. So I was supposing the war on drugs inspired the name War on Terror. Anyways, I think we can get back to set of Vivek's observations. I have Anandita and Brinda left.
Yeah, they had to go. They left goodbye
Oh, I
messages in the
had
chat.
a question.
But we gained Vishal in the process. So hi Vishal.
Sorry? Oh, Vishal joined.
Yeah.
Hi, I was about to say I'm back, but no. So yeah, I mean, how did everyone like the film?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm very
Yeah.
happy that everyone-
Absolutely.
So, Samartha, you saw the whole film?
Amazingly, yes.
Yeah. That is actually for me. That's a yardstick that a film was good. Samartha has seen the whole film. I'm pretty sure it is.
No, it was really very good. It was, interesting. I can't find words to describe it. Just the whole, because sometimes you just enjoy, a film. It could be for entertainment or whatever. But
Right.
this was also very, very educative of world affairs. So it was a big.
It seemed to mirror what's happening all over the world, right? So
Yeah,
was quite something that took me. It really. The moment I saw that they also have a Kangna Ranaut figure, that's when I realized that this phenomenon is there everywhere. It's not only in India. So quite.
So credits to Vishal and Vivek for picking out an excellent documentary.
Oh yeah.
It's actually
Thanks
Vishal's
for-
suggestion. I just voted for it.
I actually am very happy to recommend this film because I've been asking people to watch it just because of this one reason that it's not an isolated thing. Things are something like this is happening all over the world, but I mean people don't have time, and I mean they have their reasons not to watch it, but I'm very glad that it's an important film for me. Also, she's won the Nobel Peace Prize, which is not a yardstick of anything, but this gumption to have. I mean, not everybody has that fight in them, So to fight against an authoritarian figure is much more difficult than. It's not it seems like a romantic idea, but when one does it on the ground, it is a very difficult thing. It's unimaginable. For me, it's unimaginable. I'm not somebody who can do it. And
I mean, I'd like to second that. I think she has more balls than most men that I know.
Oh, 100%.
To be fair, Vishal, none of us have the caliber to do it.
So,
And my apologies for the use of such a word, but I was just trying to.
yeah, I totally agree with you because I have seen this about me that when I see a film and I see something relatable in terms of strength of character, when a person does something which I realize is in terms of character something that I will not be able to do, and it's also not in the romantic realm, wherein it's just not an idea. Somebody, it's very well documented in the film. So I tend to find it. I tend to find those ideas riveting. I am not. It's not easy for me to get away from such an idea, which happened with this film.
I just want to mention, in that context, there was this lady who, one of the other reporters who is smoking a cigarette, and then you can see how terrified she is. Like, she's in tears, and she says, "Marissa has, the guts for died," like, or something to that effect.
True.
So it all becomes real at that point.
So I find that one. I mean, that is the reason I wanted. So I'll tell you the reason that this film interests me is there is also this conversation that how free is the media, right? Wherein you can say there is a liberal media and you can say there is the other side. But the other side also comes up with this point that the liberal media is also not free. And it's a very fair point, by the way. So when I was seeing that film, there was this conversation that was happening with somebody I know. And it's a very legit conversation in my view. But when somebody like that, when somebody picks up a fight like that, knowing that what she's doing is the right thing to do, it's kind of settles the debate for you. So I mean, what an amazing journey that she has had. With so much respect for her.
Absolutely, and also stories with strong women protagonists. I find them interesting because I think there are not enough of them. So it's always good to see movies and documentaries with.
In fact, it's a very good observation because what happens in the film, it's something. It's obviously a documentary, but let's say you wanted to make a film on a character like her, and you choose to have her styled in a particular way, in a way as in she has a shorter hair like men do, she wears clothes like men do, so it becomes a stylistic choice and it becomes a very interesting choice. But in the documentary, it's all there, like it's real life, as you said, she has more balls than men do, so it all fits into that idea. So this film is that's documentary, this story is so fascinating that way.
I think if anything, it shows that testicles are not the measure of any kind of courage.
They are not. I mean, you hit somebody in the balls and you hit women in the sensitive area, who's going to get hurt more? Plain and simple.
I can answer that question, but
I have not digressed, but I'll quickly tell you, Vishal, I saw Bhuvan show me, and there's something we can discuss later about the same issue. What was just discussed. So anyway, we'll discuss that later.
Yeah.
I wanted to, in addition to Vivek's earlier points on the qualities of a dictator or a would-be dictator, I noticed that a sense of toxic masculinity is something that is very apparent and very normal among these people. I'm sorry.
A
Very
strong
apparent
man
and very
image.
normal.
That's what they call
The
it.
dictator and the general. The general character deserves to be highlighted here. With
Yeah.
he had no thick skin at all. He used to get, like, even in the interview segments, he would just get rattled by the smallest of observations. It's a really interesting character trait that I observed.
And additionally, I mean, throughout the documentary, I didn't notice the documentarian trying to give us any kind of answers because even with the running candidates, they didn't really have an answer. The opposition to Duterte, she kept insisting that it, the killings are not morally justified, and he cannot keep murdering them for the sake of policy. But she didn't really have an answer to the drug issue.
Adding to that, actually, I know someone who's very open-minded. She's a Filipino. Okay, she's right now living in the US, but she comes from Philippines. She spent all her life there. Very open-minded person. I thought that she would hate Duterte, right? And I made a few comments which were obviously not appreciative of Duterte, and she said, "But I like him." That's the thing that she said. So, as you said, it's easy to oppose someone, but what is the answer? What is the answer? I mean,
I would say the opposite. It's not easy to oppose someone. It's easy to
No.
praise
I'm
someone.
saying as a documentarian, for example, you might put out a documentary which says that these are the problems. But what is the answer? There is answers are much more complicated than that. Like if you can say, okay, we are living in an authoritarian regime. What is the answer to that?
That's a great question. I think
Saying that the other side is going to solve all the problems, it's also not actually. It's not the right answer. I mean,
so. Something I wanted to bring in, at this point is I feel when you mentioned the woman, right, who's your friend. One of the things I've noticed is people often follow certain politicians because they solve some of their problems, whatever that is. Like say you're a Mexican refugee trying to cross the border. You don't care who is letting you in. Somebody who let you in and saved your life, you're going to respect that person, right?
yes.
So if, in my case, if I'm trying to go to US for and get a job, somebody improves a whatever tech worker immigration thing, I'm going to respect that guy, irrespective of what else he or she is doing. So I think sometimes people think that people follow politicians for their overall ideology, but I think majority of the citizens are not even educated up to enough to make a judgment.
And then you actually can't blame the citizen for not being politically educated, because it's not his or her job. It is not their job to be politically educated. Should they live their lives or be politically correct? What do they do?
And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the whole thing. That just like Vivek brought up with the bill, right? With the 150-page bill, no citizen, the average civilian, can even evaluate what is in that bill properly, objectively, right? Like so, and neither do they have the time to consult the right people to be able to do so to make an informed decision. So, like I knew a person who used to like Rajiv Gandhi simply because he was handsome. And I'm sure the same has happened with JFK. So people are voting for leaders for reasons as diverse as that, right from how they look when they talk or something like that, all the way to highly informed people in terms of policy. But I think a large number of them might might have vested interest, like if Duarte did something that helped that woman who was your friend, right? It could be, I'm not saying that's the case, that could be the reason she liked.
True. It's
That would essentially take us to the inherent problems with a two-party system and a democracy by itself.
Yeah.
Not to forget, everyone, and I really mean everyone, can be swayed by propaganda. No matter how intelligent you think you
be swayed by what? Sorry,
are,
Vivek.
propaganda.
Are you marketing the next film for next week?
Oh, right. I mean, yeah, in a way. So it doesn't matter how smart you are or how well read you are. The fact of the matter is, you can get washed by the power of propaganda. And so whether Vishal's friend is in that situation, I don't know. But I
think
know
there
for a
was
fact
also
one of
another
my
thing
friends.
that
Yeah, Jeff?
sorry, continue. I had
No,
some lag.
go
So
on.
no more check out Hampson for next week.
No, Jeff, please say, what were you saying?
No, I mean, I think every democracy struggles with that argument in the dialogue, which is why, like say countries like US and UK, even with even with all the liberal, I mean, even with the power that the fourth estate or the media has in their in these countries, they still have to deal. They still have to deal with these problems. The people still struggle with this or are still motivated by the propaganda.
Struggle with propaganda. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry. They're still motivated by the more propagandist solutions that the politicians favor. So, like easy justice.
Interestingly,
So
there are essentially two directions you can take with in terms of uh, uh, the nature of propaganda. One is an Illulian direction, and the other is a Burney direction. So I'm sorry if I'm digressing and cutting you off in the middle of your point. So what essentially happens is, especially with these politicians, they take up the Burney sense of propaganda, wherein the politicians and the propagandists are by nature supposed to lie,
By
and
nature supposed to?
they're supposed to lie, and
Huh.
the responsibility of checking that falls on the consumer,
Hmm.
that is you and I.
Hmm.
So Elul brings a moralistic point of view to it, and he pushes it on the uh, propagandists themselves. So if somebody knows something is wrong and something is a lie or an inflated truth, uh, they shouldn't really make that statement in the first place. So Edward Burney was commissioned to set up uh, an institution in the 1950s and 60s, or probably in the 30s and 40s. I'm not sure of the timeline, but this was during the first Red Scare. So I'm supposing it was during the 20s. So he was commissioned to set up an organization for the government to help them build excellent propaganda. Why I brought this point up was because uh, uh, all the governments, all the developing countries, and all the developed nations, in some sense, follow this ideology, this sense of morality. So they don't, even if they are making an inflated statement, they don't really hold themselves accountable because that is not their responsibility. And the judicial system is somehow designed to not really consider that to be a serious threat to the functioning of a society.
So
Yeah.
another point that I was going to make in regards to propaganda is that
Mhm.
one thing we have to remember, that why the senior generation falls into this propaganda trap so easily is because they are from an era where publishing meant some degree of verified information, right?
Mm.
The fact that something has made it into a book or something has come to the newspaper or the TV news, that means it has been researched, verified, ratified, this and that before reaching the public. They are from that mindset. But now with the internet, since anyone and everyone has the power to publish, they've not evolved with this new technology. They still tend to believe whatever is published is true. So, which is why WhatsApp forwards have been so successful, because they believe that the fact that it has been published and someone has taken the time to make an animation video explaining things, it must be true. It's probably coming from some higher organization that they've not heard about.
Mm.
So, I mean, yeah, it's laughable, but it's also sad
True.
that people are, are not able to identify this, and the powers that be are taking great advantage of them.
But Vivek, there is also a cultural bent to it.
Hmm.
Um, if I remember correctly, uh, there was not much political disagreement back then as we have now.
True.
Even the centrist and the right-wing uh, political parties had something in common,
Hmm.
which is why it took uh, uh, the right wingers
Huh.
a rallying point of the Ram Mandir.
Actually, there were, which doesn't happen now. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just adding to what you're saying. There were a lot of Congress members who were part of the RSS till the 70s. So
Yeah, so there was not much distinction. And the reason a lot of distinctions popped up, uh, a lot of these political supporters, based on their ideology and based on their inclination, started to polarize themselves.
Actually, Nikhil, I
Hmm.
don't think, in my view, I don't think that. Are you saying that there were not? I think there always was polarization. It was just that uh, it was not really. How do I say it?
Significant.
Not significant. No, no. Because if you look at the polarization that we have right now,
Hmm.
which is out in the open,
Hmm.
it's not possible that people were not polarized and then suddenly they started talking about it. It was there, in not inherent, it was there somewhere, but it was lying dormant because they did not have the power, they did not have the voice. Because when India was formed, it was formed from a liberal point of view. It had a prime minister who wanted power, yes, but he also wanted to he was an atheist, and he wanted to form this country in his own image. He wanted it to be a secular country, and hence there and then Mahatma Gandhi was killed by a right winger, right? So the right wing was untouchable for a long time, which has changed. People always had that in them, but they did not have that sort of confidence because they were not in power. But after now, they've seen that their people are in power, and that's why they know that they can do whatever they want, they can say whatever they want, and they can get away with it. Because the amount of hate and polarization, India is a secular country, but there's a lot of difference between people that's there. But the amount of polarization that we see now, it is not possible that people were not polarized and they suddenly became polarized. It's coming out.
I'll I'll give you an example. Um, I'm guessing it was during the 50s when it was right after the independence struggle. There were a lot of landlords, and there were peasants who wanted to abolish the zamindari system.
Hmm.
And these peasants, especially, and labor workers, they started taking up communist ideologies and leftist directions. It's not that we did not really have a communist party back then, but it was pretty weak
Hmm.
and it was essentially voiceless.
Hmm.
It was with these kinds of um, undertakings that they started to get some recognition.
Hmm.
So it's not that there was not much polarization, but in the central political spectrum, you didn't really have too many nuances, which is why they could for I guess about 30 no, at least 20-25 years they couldn't really make a strong distinction between BJP and the
No,
uh,
that is true. That is true because when the country was formed, right, the aims were different. What happens is when you start, so we'll take the example of Aam Aadmi Party. So
mhm,
when it was formed, I mean,
mhm.
I'm not saying Arvind Kejriwal is a saint. I'm just saying when they were formed for the right reasons.
If he
But
was a saint, he wouldn't be in politics.
so what I'm saying is that they when they launched, they had the right idea, okay. But it's very clear, even though they might be doing a good job, I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
not an expert. I've not been to Delhi, but it seems like they are. But even if they would be doing the right job, it's clear that it has a personality cult around it. It's very obvious to see. But in time, when the party was formed, the idea was to do social work. Okay, but in time, you
I would strongly contradict you with that. No party and no government
correct. No, I'm just
made
giving you. I'm just
for
saying. I'm just
sure
saying. I'm
the
just
welfare
saying. I'm just
state
saying.
is
It feels
it.
like no, no. I am not saying. I'm not arguing with you over that point. I'm
Mhm.
just giving you an example that when the country was formed, obviously Nehru wanted power. Clearly, he did a lot of things which are obviously out there. He was the first one who played with the constitution. It's not Modi who's the first person to play with the constitution. He was the first one. In fact, the laws that he's made has made it possible for everyone else to play with the constitution. But when the country was formed, there was because you fought against an enemy, you fought against someone, and there was a righteous reason to do that. There were enough people in power to do the right thing. At least it felt like that. But in time that went away, right? Then it's only a matter of keeping power. Because if today they had to do away with the zamindari system, it would not have been possible. It was possible only then. So times are different. Things change. You cannot compare that to today. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying the times were different. People had different aims back then. And now it is not possible to go back to doing the right thing. We are so far away from it. Everything has to totally collapse for us to come back to that position.
I have a question. Yes, Amita, go on.
There's actually a completely parallel thread. So don't take it seriously and answer whenever you feel like. I'm throwing it open to everybody. I was just amazed how many of the people involved were talking in English and not the native language. You know, in the interviews, the president, the reporters. I just found it weird. Is English spoken so frequently in the Philippines?
Yeah. Even I found it very not weird. It was quite interesting the amount of people talking in good English. By the way, there is this documentary called Assassins. I would highly recommend everybody to watch it because it was insane what happened. So I think was that Indonesia or Malaysia? I think it was in Malaysia, and everybody seemed to speak really good English, like that, like in this movie, in Thousand Cuts.
Yeah, it's really.
That was an interesting. Yeah, that was also something that crossed my mind. I agree with you. Something else like.
I mean, the sophistication with which Duarte is doing the language was pretty amazing. It was.
Yeah, because India was ruled by the Britishers. As far as I know, Philippines was ruled by Spain, I think. So
yeah,
that is why I am surprised at the proficiency of the language.
The other aspect of this is, but of course, if you see Duarte in the public speeches is talking in Spanish. I assume it's Spanish.
It's Tagalog.
That is not Spanish, actually. That is Filipino.
No, that is Tagalog.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Philip. The name tag. I'm sorry.
Like Spanish.
Yeah, with Marissa, you know, what interested me was if you want to connect to your people, typically, right? A leader chooses local language.
Yes.
Typically, not always. Yes. So she was kind of unique. You know, I'm not judging her, but I thought it's unique that she expresses herself in English everywhere. Maybe because she grew up in the US or whatever the story, but it's amazing how she has created that following by not using the native language. And she looks quite anglicized, I mean, for lack of better word, or westernized or whatever, right?
I think Americanization is a common phenomenon in the Philippines. It has a strong influence since the 70s, ever since they started getting nurses from the Philippines.
It is worth pointing out, and this may be surprising, that a lot of Indian call center jobs were exported to Philippines and Vietnam.
Now it makes sense after seeing this movie.
Not surprising at all now.
Yep. So there you go. If you were thinking how and why,
because
there's a big reason why.
The documentary.
I was wondering how the discussion might end. So I think the final statement every one of us would make is.
No. Before we end,
I don't want to end the discussion. I was just thinking of the final statement all of us might probably give. It might be pay for your news.
Oh, I mean, I don't have
a
statement to make, I wanted to ask a question.
Oh, go ahead. I don't want to end the
discussion. I think one thing that we need to also, I would like to add was, I was not very keen on yesterday's documentary because Not that the documentary is not good; it's a very good documentary. But I expect, like, I felt that it was not something which. When I saw the documentary, I did not feel that it's something new in terms of the ideas that were being talked about. But Vivek had a very interesting idea of clubbing that film with this one, and which totally sold me on this particular idea. Otherwise, I was not very keen on this other film. So I think we should give credit to Vivek for
And
clubbing
Vishal.
these films together.
By the way, I think Vivek had a question
Yeah, yeah.
to raise.
Yeah, since we were talking about polarization, I wanted to ask all the participants uh, that right now everything is polarized, right?
Hmm.
Not just news. Uh, the actors that you may follow, the music you listen to, the films you watch, the directors who make these films, every single thing has been polarized, and you have to pick a side, or else you're seen as a supporter of the other party or other side. Um, Wanted to get a little more insight about this, if anyone has any. How did we get to this, or why is this going in this direction? So, since this is not related to the film,
Mhm.
maybe we can start with Mohammed, because he hasn't gotten a chance to speak for a while.
Oh, please, Mohammed.
Are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So,
talking about
about this
the
polarization thing, do you have any view, like how or why this is happening?
my answer would be that I just love to listen to, we don't do intentionally like certain things because they are some kind of polarizing intention. But I'm not quite sure. But yeah, that's a good question. That
Earlier, music was music, movies were movies, right? Or
Mhm.
books were books. Now
Yeah, now
everything is left and right.
yeah
That
now
was
they
every
try
single
to
thing.
segregate them, try to say that yeah, if you're listening to this or watching this, definitely you are supporting their ideas, ideologies. Yeah,
This
that
is
that is
also
why.
like Hegelian dialectics, right? That's what is it? It is, if I'm not wrong, that you keep people confused with this or that. You always keep them in a state of constant conflict, so that they don't think about real things. They don't think about important things. They actually do not think about things which matter.
But one might argue that politics is as real as it gets.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we uh, we judge, not judge, but uh, when we say okay, things are not going the right way, why do people vote for these guys? Why don't people think that this is the right thing to do? Why don't people think more that these things are more than what meets the eye? But the idea of politics is that you keep people engaged in trivial things so that they don't think about important things. They don't evolve. They do not. They if because if people actually start thinking about issues, if they start having clarity on issues, this will be a totally different world.
Mm.
See,
Uh,
and
if I can I, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Mo.
what Vivek asked is very nice question. I can put here one of my colleague. He objected me to listening this Chaya Chaya, that song of Shah Rukh Khan. Chalo Chaya Chaya Chaya. That song. He said if you are watching that song, definitely you are a what to say, little a bad person. Ethically, you are teacher. You shouldn't listen to that song. He said. Then you know.
Mohammed, sorry, is this after his son got caught, or is this did this happen earlier?
No, no, no. I'm saying my colleague said me not to listen to that song.
No, that's what I'm saying. Did this happen earlier or
let
before?
him complete, I'll tell you why.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
No, no, go on, go on, go on.
So when I researched it, I got that song was written by a Sufi saint. I was just blown away. how people just take it for just face value and without knowing the intention why it was written. Or, but yeah, we try to means label it with certain what to say ideas that this is bad, this is good, this is leftist, this is rightist. Yeah, it's very difficult to answer those people if you don't have authentic information, facts. Very difficult.
But what was the objection? That's what I think Vishal and me
No,
both
no.
want
My
to know.
question was, why did he ask you to not listen to the song? Was it before Shah Rukh Khan's son got arrested, or was it?
No. It's nothing about Shah Rukh Khan's son. It is only that lady is dancing there. It's little
Oh,
sensual. Uh,
okay, okay.
so it may. He was questioning my moral that being a teacher, you shouldn't be listening or watching that video song.
I remember when this film came out, there was another objection about this song because there is a reference that uh, heaven is beneath your feet, something like that. So a lot of the Muslim population was not happy about that. I thought maybe it is because of that. Is it?
Maybe, but yeah, it was mostly sensual. He said you are.
Ah, I see. Okay.
He was questioning my
Hmm.
integrity.
You should tell him I'm not watching the video. I'm listening to the song.
Actually, I started to do. Actually, I had this video,
So
so
you should have played something even more explicit in front of him.
we'll
No.
try it.
So my question was that, see, historically, India was obsessed with cinema and cricket. These have been the two primal obsessions that almost every Indian is born with, if you could argue that. But how did all that get pushed aside for politics? Now, right now, politics is the core obsession of the country.
I wanted to make an attempt to try and answer Vivek's question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Really?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So there is a sense of polarization, mostly because that we are coming in terms with new information every day. I remember having watched Game of Thrones, I think, with a lot of people, and that was essentially the norm back then. And as soon as Netflix started to pick up some kind of traction, there were 1,000 people watching 1,000 different shows, and it was based on their appeal and based on their sense of political correctness. And there were there is usually a sense of uh, um, morality that we associate with these with art and with politics and with anything we consume. So if there is a sense of polarization, I think I particularly am a bit optimistic about it because it brings forward a culture that is hospitable probably to everyone. I don't think a lot of uh, people in the LGBTQ community would appreciate Chandler's homophobic jokes in Friends, despite the general culture back then. So I, for the most part, see the polarization uh, as a positive element, but I mean there is that doesn't necessarily generalize the whole question there.
See, in India, if you're talking about political polarization, uh, we have to understand that without naming the organization, India has the biggest organization in the world. I mean, in terms of members, and for the first time in their history, they have legitimacy. So, and there is an attempt in changing, and they have successfully done it to some extent, changing the uh, what is the right word for it? Indian democracy, the texture of the Indian population has changed. The social fabric has changed for sure. So Why there is a polarization? Because there is an attempt at, there is a clear push towards doing it, and anybody can do it. But when the biggest organization in the world with proper with a proper plan, with an idea, if it does it, then you see the results on the street. In terms of culture, as you said, like LGBTQ and why there is a polarization on that front, I think it's also because now they, again, even for them, like they have, because I've had this conversation with my friend. What happened was, he said, why it happened with this one. What's his name? I think Superman is going to be bisexual, or his son is going to be bisexual, something like that. Do you guys know about this? I think it is Superman. I'm not sure which particular character. So his question was, why is there so much LGBTQ out there? Why does everyone need to have? Why do we need to talk about sexuality? Why do kids need to talk about sexuality? And there were a lot of arguments that we had. He had merits in some of his arguments. But what I was trying to tell him was, for the first time in the history of the world, LGBTQ women have a lot of power, and power which can sway things. And now they might use it to sway it in the wrong way also, which doesn't discredit the, what is it say? Which shouldn't discredit the movement. So it's all about power. Right now, there is so much polarization because there is a group of people who have power, who have legitimacy, and they are trying to sway things according to what they want. At least that's what I feel.
Nikhil is about to sink any minute. His battery is completely dead. So any moment now.
Yeah,
Poor
I
Nikhil.
think uh, so. Bye, guys, and thank you for the delightful discussion. And
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
I'll probably join you guys on the Telegram group when we bring this up again.
Okay.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Kritik, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just about to say bye. Nothing much.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else that we uh, were going to talk about the film? So before the whole conversation went on its own tangent, we were talking about how there are similarities between the various countries. And Vishal, I think you were not there, but I made a set of observations about, on an abstract level, there are certain similarities that I noticed in the second viewing, which are common across multiple countries.
Correct.
The leader pretends to be a victim and pretends to be an outsider of politics, and he says what he really thinks, and he's not like the other political people. So people feel an urge to support him and so on.
Correct.
Things like that. So I made a set of observations which I'll share with you later on. And we were talking about how this is being replicated in multiple countries, not just ours.
Yeah.
And we were trying to make sense of why this is happening.
Okay.
Any clue on why this same formula is being repeated over and over?
I'm afraid I would have to repeat it, but I don't mind repeating it because I don't know if there was any construction on it. But I myself did notice just very lightly that these kind of right wingers, they kind of feed off of each other's propaganda. Like I'll just repeat it at least for Vishal's sake. Uh, how they this Semitism leads to this kind of Jews are controlling the whole world narrative, and they pick George Soros as their boogeyman, and now that is kind of repeated in India for some reason, you know. And this war on drugs was started by a bunch of conservatives in US who still really believe that, and now that's being followed, or at least the rhetoric is being repeated in Philippines itself. I mean, I was hoping that if you guys also have noticed some kind of things where these kinds of talking points or motivations are repeated, even though it doesn't make like a complete 100% sense. Because I was very shocked to hear these George Soros conspiracy theories on Republic TV itself. I heard that Arnab Goswami just screaming about it.
What is the conspiracy theory? By the way, I do believe Jews rule the world, but again, what is the conspiracy theory? The George Soros thing that you said?
Every other community in the world thinks George Soros is trying to bring them down.
Oh,
And
really?
apparently, I don't know how 100% true this is, but
Uh,
even in Muslim countries, they have there's a huge anti-Jewish, they have kind of Jewish conspiracy theories.
yeah. So, actually, that is true. Jews do rule the world, but whether or not George Soros is trying to bring down the Indian government or any other government for that matter, that is, I really have no idea. But I, it seems like a pleasant coincidence, right? Like all these things are happening all over the world, but it shouldn't be. My feeling is that, as I said, I think right wingers, they so the world was being ruled by left wingers, liberals, pseudo liberals, whatever you call them. But and they were very clear about steering the world away from the right wing. They might have brought secular principles, they might have given the world secular principles, but have they actually really made people happy? That's the question. And when people are not happy, so there is a section of people that support you. There is a different section of people that don't support you. So you have the liberal support, and then there is this section, the right wingers. But the liberals are also not happy with the direction in which you're taking the world, as in they do not have enough money to live their lives. And then somebody comes in promising the world to you. You come to power. Now, I think there is this issue all over the world, wherein the right wingers did not have enough power, they did not have enough voice. But now what has happened is they've come into power, and they've come into such they've come into power with such majorities, like even in Duterte's case, that the right wing has gotten that voice. It was always there. It was always there inside, and now it is coming out. That's what I feel. Why is it happening at the same time? My feeling is everyone is unhappy. That's what I feel. Everyone is just unhappy with the state of the world. And that balance has changed all over the world. That's what I feel.
The conspiracy about Soros that I am aware of is not entirely political, actually. So maybe I'm not hanging out with the right conspiracy people to know all the
If you
conspiracies.
guys want, we can have a discussion on conspiracy theories. I can get you the right person.
I know you can.
He
So-
believes in everything, and you guys will probably.
But you also believe in a couple of them, no? You just admitted.
Half of you will leave the discussion totally changed. Like you will believe in all of those theories.
But to be fair, you also admitted that you also believe in some of them.
No, I believe after I did a deep dive into it. I did a very deep dive into it, and lot of it made, not lot of it, but there were some things that make sense. For example, there is no argument that Jews do rule the world.
That again is a conspiracy, isn't it?
How is that a conspiracy?
All right, that's a discussion.
But anyway, what's a different discussion?
So, what I've heard is that this guy, he hedges his money, and in the sense, if you've seen what's that stock market movie, I forgot, Big Short, right? So if you watch that movie, they explain this concept very well, that you take something which is stable and then you bet money against it, and most people would assume that, hey, since this thing is stable, there's no way you will win. And he does that repeatedly with multiple countries, that he hedges against, I don't know if he hedges against currency or he hedges against property. I don't know what he does. Again, all conspiracy. Okay, all
So is this a
out
new thing?
there.
George Soros
I think
trying to top
he
the Indian
became
government?
infamous from my memory. He became infamous because he made $1 billion in profit when the British pound lost value.
So it seems that he's hedging against currency, maybe.
I don't
So,
know the correct term for it, but I know that's what he became famous for.
so in a sense, long story short, he profits from destabilizing countries. He profits from
No,
countries
but
that
the
destabilize.
real
He doesn't have the power to destabilize countries. He's one person. But the conspiracy believes that, since he's making money out of countries which suffer, obviously he must have a hand, and they try to find links that he's funding XYZ NGOs, and that's why he's involved with everything. So again, all
this is
conspiracy.
completely different discussion, but he does actually support a bunch of organizations and all. He spent $15 billion. So it's just that they feel they are threatened. But as to any grand conspiratorial plans, that is the real questionable thing.
Yeah, I was only talking about this because you brought up Soros, and I'm just sharing
I
the
really
little
had no idea
information that I
about
know.
this character, man. Like now
Not
it's
that I
very
believe in
interesting.
any of this, but this is uh, this might be a reason why a lot of people subscribe to this. I I try not to pay much attention to
Actually,
any of
what
this
happens with these
conspiracy.
conspiracy theories is, right. For example, uh, milk milk is of two types, A1 and A2. Okay, and actually, in theory, not in theory, actually, Indian cows, they produce A2, and I think the Western cows like Jersey cows they produce A1, and Indian cows are supposed to be more healthy. It's a much more desirable kind of milk, A2. So, and what happens with, right, good quality creates less quantity. So Indian cows used to give less milk, and during the White Revolution, what happened was, the White Revolution happened because bulls were imported from the West, and the milk, the output of milk increased in India. Now, this is what has happened. Okay, so now the conspiracy theory is, okay, to make sure that there are no original there are no original Indian cows out there giving milk. These bulls were imported from the outside, and that's why they keep on killing Indian cows, so that they may make sure this becomes an issue. So you keep on foisting these क्या बोलते हैं?
Seeds of doubt.
Seeds of doubt. So what happens with these theories is, right, they work on, they pick up something which is very legit, which would have happened even if somebody was not doing any conspiracy, and then they merge their theories into it. So now who's to argue with them, right? Because what they're arguing about, not what they're presenting, is actually what has happened. It's actually happened, but then they take it to the next level because they see conspiracy everywhere.
To bring the point back to the film, this was mentioned in the film that even if you put the fact out there, even if you release the facts, all they have to do is sow enough seeds of doubt to confuse people.
Yes.
You don't have to be right, or you don't have to prove the fact wrong. You just have to confuse people by showing so many alternate points of opinion and giving popularity by bots or their armies to those popular opinions. You start to believe that this falsehood and this fact are on an equal playing field, when in reality they're not. And they pointed out this in the film. All right. So, is there anything else that comes up regarding the film? Anything we need to talk about? Because we're close to 3 hours on this.
Wow. So good. I mean,
It's been a while, no? Last time Tokyo we did, I think, 3 hour 11 minutes.
no, it's a film worth talking about, right? And it's very.
Tokyo still holds the record though. Tokyo was 3 hour 9 minutes or 3 hour 11 minutes, something like that.
And that was my first film discussion. So.
That was your first discussion, right? So
I remember, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if all's good, then I'll end the stream.
Yeah, sure.